Welcome to the Tuscarawas County Anti-Drug Coalition podcast, bringing you open and honest conversations about resources in Tuscarawas County. Now here's your host, Jodi Salvo.
Hi, this is Jodi Salvo. Welcome to another Tuscarawas County Anti-Drug Coalition podcast. Today we're in part 5 of our What I Wish Someone Would Have Told Me series. This series, I'm really excited about it, and I have loved the podcasts that have come out of it, is what I wish someone would have told me. And we've developed this series in response to helping people find resources here in our community. We know when people are walking through addiction and into recovery, it's not the one-size-fits-all for anybody. So there's always a unique story and a situation, and then information on what was just really helpful for my own personal story. And we've just had wonderful people sharing in the last couple episodes. And today I have John Bazaar, and I am just going to go ahead and throw this over to John. He can tell you a little bit about who he is, and then we'll talk a little bit about his story as well. John.
I'm John Bazaar. I live in just outside of Dover here, and been here 12 years now. I grew up in upstate New York.
It's a little bit of change, huh?
It is a little bit of a change. Believe it or not, a little bit of culture shock. It really is. You know, it doesn't seem like moving between states would be that different, but
I moved from New Jersey to Dover,
you and
Ohio,
I have similar experiences then. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful, Tuscarawas County, wonderful place to be, but man, there are some major cultural shifts.
Yes.
Yeah.
The way I behaved in upstate New York does not work as well here in Tuscarawas County.
You'll appreciate this. My husband used to work in Manhattan, and he loved driving in the city. And
oh, man.
And we moved to Tuscarawas County, and that's been a while now, but he was working in Freeport.
Oh.
And he was an aggressive New York driver, and you know exactly what I mean.
I do.
The horn is involved in every turn you make in New York City.
Yes.
And he's driving out to Freeport, Harrison County, and he's, pumping on that horn. If anyone knows him, he's really mild-mannered, except for when he was New York driving. And I would say to him, honey, you are going to get shot.
If there's 15 feet between the front bumper of your car and the back bumper of the car in front of you, that's enough room to stick a car in. And they're coming.
First month I was in Tuscarawas County, I remember talking to my girlfriends from other cities, because I lived in cities. And I'm like, I have not been honked at or swore at like in 30 days.
Yeah. Yes.
Anyways, I'm sorry.
No, that's a good. But that paints a picture of who we are, where we came from. My parents, my father was self-employed. He was a machinist. My mother was a homemaker. We had a large family. There was no alcohol in our house.
Okay, so how many siblings?
I have 8 siblings.
8 siblings. No alcohol in the house.
No alcohol in the house. Churchgoers, definitely. Grew up Roman Catholic. There's a bunch of experiences there that I will say have colored my attitude in that direction. I don't feel the need to go into detail.
Okay.
But, yeah.
At what age did you first use then?
18.
Okay.
I did not start drinking until I got out of the house.
So, John, I'm already excited for this podcast, because I think just hearing that, I love when we have so many different ways that people end up in addiction and can share that story. Because some of the big barriers we fight around addiction is people not understanding addiction and sometimes blaming that person in addiction. And I always want people to understand, anyone can end up in this place,
Oh, yeah.
I love stories as well when not in my house, intact family of faith, and here I am at 18 18.
Yep.
A lot
18.
of times people think, well, that's a little bit older. And that's
Yeah.
what we're always saying, 21 is the legal drinking age. And if you have a family history, not at all. That's kind of the mantra we keep saying.
Yeah.
But didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to highlight, this wasn't an early onset abuse or anything like that.
It wasn't for me. Being in the family that we were in, we struggled financially. We did okay. We never felt that we were badly off.
Okay.
I won't say that, but there were times when it was obvious that other people had quite a bit more than we did, and some of them made it known.
Okay.
So that was kind of tough on all of us. But my parents were of the Depression era generation where you did not waste anything, and it was. If something wasn't going well, it's more like, I'm sorry for your luck, get over it. We've got to get this done. And but that was what we had to do.
Okay.
From my point of view, I was early into academics and science, and I tried my best in sports, and I was pretty good, but I was no baseball player.
Okay.
I just didn't quite have the knack, and I'm not sure I really had that much. I liked to play, but not enough where I would go spend many hours
You didn't have that
playing.
passion.
I did not have the passion. So, I was one who I liked science. I liked physics. I liked chemistry, and I did those things pretty well in school. So I wasn't doing badly in school. Talking to my classmates many years later, that I find out that I was very well respected, but
we don't know that at those ages.
I didn't know that at that age. That's for sure. I didn't. If somebody told me that, I wouldn't have believed them. But that also goes back to where I was mentally when I turned 18. When I turned 18, I had a full ride scholarship. And I turned 18. I got off to school. It was a private school. And I attended classes for 2 weeks.
Wow.
I went from not drinking to
Out of control.
Out of control in 2 weeks. So, I barely attended classes. I pulled D's,
So I'm assuming the scholarship went bye-byes?
Yes, it did. Yep.
Okay.
And in today's money, I'm thinking in terms of a private engineering school that would have been tuition today would have been $150,000
Wow.
for a 4-year degree, and I threw that away.
Okay.
And what's insane about that is I did it twice, not once.
So you started drinking, it sounds like right when you went on campus.
First weekend.
Did you have a family history or anything?
My grandfather was an alcoholic.
Did
but
you
I
guys
didn't
know that? You
Did
didn't
not
know
know that. And it turns out that my uncle and his family, especially his wife, my aunt, drank.
Okay.
She was an alcoholic. He was not, but she was.
Now, did your parents know that, or anyone
yes,
really?
they knew.
They knew it.
They knew.
Okay.
They knew. It was not talked
But it would have been a different generation back then, so it probably wasn't.
It was not
open
discussed.
Okay.
It was not discussed at all. I really wish my mother had talked to us about my grandfather, but I look back on it and I say to myself, if I had gone through what my parents went through, I'm not sure I would have been any different.
Okay.
Because they went through the Depression, of course. And then came World War II. My father came home a disabled veteran. And back then, disabled veterans had a hard time getting jobs. And Social Security really wasn't anything you could depend on.
Sure.
All of that, which was one of the reasons that kind of pushed my father into going into business for himself. He did well.
Okay.
So, but
you got 8 kids, so that's a lot to support.
Yeah. Yes, and that's it. He went through all of the trauma of the recovery from his wounds, and and those wounds were permanent, and the struggles and the poverty and all of that.
Yeah.
And they didn't discuss that with us at all. They were trying to protect us. I get that.
Sure.
But as far as my grandfather's alcoholism, that would have been an important thing for me to understand.
Do you think that if you would have known that would have been a game changer on you experimenting in college?
Might have steered me in a different direction.
Okay.
My attitude toward health and safety was, I want to be healthy, I want to be safe, and people have commented on that. But when it came to alcohol, there was none of that. That was completely.
I really appreciate you sharing that. The podcast that we did last week with, is it Jess Beamer? There's some young ladies that listen to that podcast that are in addiction at this point or, working towards recovery. And they all had shared, I heard through a conversation, that one of the common themes they had is they wish their parents would have had some more conversation around this issue.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons we really have these podcasts to share information that we want to know. And one is parents talk about these issues. Now, with you, John, I do understand that generation gap was probably a little bit different, where those kind of conversations,
they didn't happen.
They were hush-hush in homes. So, but still, as a young person, if I would have known.
Yes. And part of that, anything with addiction, whether it's alcohol or drugs or anything, one of the biggest issues with addiction is denial. And not just denial of the person using, but denial of the people in the family around them.
Great point.
We don't, if we don't talk about it, it won't happen. If we don't, if we don't talk about it, it's not real.
Yeah.
And somebody who's been through something traumatic will not talk about it because it's so traumatic for them. So sometimes addiction skips generations, and that's one of the ways it does that. The people in the second generation,
they're like,
we're not doing this, we're not talking about it, we're not doing it, no, ever. And that's true even today.
Yeah. You tend to see it happens one or the other. That next generation just jumps in, or they're like, I am so out of this.
Yes, yeah. Yes, exactly. And that's what happened with us.
So when you first drank, did you know pretty early on you had a problem? No.
No, I was hanging out with the cool kids.
Okay. And what were you experiencing when you were drinking at that point? Were you blacking out? Were you just...
No, I wasn't blacking out right away, but I was drunk.
Okay.
I was staggering home, and this was most of the time.
Now, do you remember, were you drinking to fit in, or were you drinking because you liked the feel, or a little bit of both?
I was drinking to fit in. I liked the feel,
Okay.
It was, all of a sudden, I was Superman, I loved all of that.
Okay.
Yeah. I had no idea, had no understanding, no concept of the fact that I was in trouble. Not a clue.
Okay.
Because I was hanging out with people who drank like I did.
Okay. So how'd that impact that first year of school then, or how long did you stay in school at that point?
I made it through the first year as far as not attending classes, but being on school property.
Okay.
I didn't make it to the fall of the following year. I didn't even bother asking. I knew I wasn't going to be allowed back. Okay. I knew what my grades were. They were terrible. And I had already been put on notice. So it was not a good scene.
So clearly you're a smart man, because you did tell me you're a mechanical engineer to this day. So how did you reconcile my grades, can't finish school, can't come back?
What I ended up doing is I ended up working in, I don't know what they call them today, but we used to call them sweatshops. Places where you were just a body that was making sure the machines were running, and you were feeding product into the machine and taking product out of the machine, and the places were not heated, ventilated, cooled in any way, shape, or form. You were in there, you were 8 hours, 10-hour days, and you were sweating.
Okay.
So I worked at a few of those for a while, and
now, were you still partying at that point? Okay.
Oh yeah.
So that
Absolutely.
beginning of college just
it just continued.
Okay.
Oh, it was one continuous stream.
Okay.
Yeah, I ended up getting fired from a couple of jobs. Of course, that was somebody else's fault, not because I was out drinking the night before, things like that. But I finally got to the point where I was tired of the sweatshop environment.
Okay.
So I went back to school. And I went to a community college and got my first 2 years of an engineering degree at a community college. That worked out well because it meant that I could stay home and go to school.
Okay.
And I didn't get mixed up in that crowd.
Right.
Didn't stop drinking.
Were you
slowed it down a little bit?
Drinking at this point, or did you
I was
start
never
drinking?
a social drinker.
Okay.
I was never a social. When I went drinking, I went to get drunk.
Okay.
That's not something I understood at the time, but that's what I was doing.
Okay.
As I sit back and look at it now, I didn't go out there to visit with people. I didn't go out there to hang out. I went there to get drunk.
Okay.
So, but again, hallmark of this disease is denial. Oh, I'm going to go out with my friends. Really?
Yeah.
So, it just, I wish I understood that at the time. But once again, I was with people that were drinking like me.
Sure.
So it was okay.
Now, let me ask you, at that phase, do you think if someone had explained a little bit about the science of addiction, understanding?
At that point, I was 5 to 10 years into my drinking.
Okay.
And no, I was beyond listening to anybody at that time. That became a point where I wasn't going to stop until it got bad enough for me emotionally to decide I needed to stop.
Okay.
That came several years later. I'd actually gotten my engineering degree and gotten a decent job, and I found myself incredibly lonely.
Okay.
That was the big deal for me. It wasn't that not that I didn't lose anything. It wasn't the fact that I had lost so much. It was that I was by myself.
Okay.
I mean, my family was there, but
any real relationship didn't exist.
I could not hold a relationship to save my life.
Okay.
Of course, it was everybody else's fault, but that was my attitude.
Yeah.
But it took a long time to understand that. In that meantime, before I actually got to that point, I went back to that same private engineering school for the second 2 years of my degree. I didn't make it.
So that environment was just really
It did
bad
not
for you.
work. No, it was not a good environment for me. So what I ended up doing, back to the sweatshops, put another couple of years there, managed to pull myself together and pull together enough money to buy a car so I could get to and from work and things like that. And it was no prize, I'm telling you. But I went from one job to another job. The third job was actually a pretty decent job. And I had managed to straighten myself up enough to get a really decent technician's job somewhere, based on my 2-year degree so far. And I spent 7 years at that job and going to night school for my bachelor's at a different private school.
So did anyone ever call you out on your drinking at this point? Employers?
Yeah.
Okay.
Employers, no.
Okay. So you were what we'd call a functional alcoholic then?
Yeah. I have to laugh about the employers calling somebody out. Some of the people I was drinking with were my employers. So, of course, they're not going to call me out. I was with them.
Yeah.
But once I got into that last job and I started school, I was so busy that I was forced to cut back on my drinking. Still spending some time on weekends going out.
Okay.
But it really, because I was working 56 hours a week and attending classes too and trying to keep up with my homework.
Okay.
Which.
So keeping busy was helpful for you.
Oh, it was incredibly helpful. Incredibly helpful. I had no idea that was what was going on, but I wanted that engineering degree so bad that's what I did to get it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'll throw out here, anyone listening, I think one of the problems we have with COVID, which makes substance use so difficult, is downtime is not probably anybody's friend, especially if you're struggling with addiction.
No.
And I will not be surprised if we're not going to see a lot of outcomes of being at home and drinking and downtime in the workplace, where people that just have more time, less accountability, that we're probably going to see the effects of this.
You're going to see a lot of that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure. People are going to be trying to come back to work, and they're going to have to change their routines, and it's going to be a struggle for them. And, it's just going to be, it's going to be a slow transition.
Yeah.
And
it's one of the things the coalition's kind of really thinking about, wanting to talk to employers about, just having those conversations right now with your employees. Because if your employees are at home and they're not driving and they're starting to drink earlier or the pours are bigger, it could be feeding, whether...
In between phone calls.
Yeah. You know this.
Oh, no. I would never do such a thing. That's the way an addicted mind works.
Yeah.
We can... if we can hide it and get away with it, we often do.
Sure. So, sorry to interrupt you.
No,
you were at that kind of place in life where at least the work and the school was kind of keeping you a little more accountable, that you didn't have time to drink as much.
I wasn't allowed to drink on site, so, and then, there was only, I was getting 6 hours sleep at night, so, there just wasn't time to go do anything else. And I was attempting to be responsible, although, obviously I was not any great saint, but I was attempting to do that. And then once I got my degree, I got my new job, got promoted to an engineering position, I suddenly found myself with a whole lot of time on my hands and didn't know what to do with myself.
Okay.
Continued my drinking. I wasn't at the intensity that it was before I started night school, but it was there. And it was after a couple of years of that I found myself saying, what's wrong with me? it took a while, and this was not something that I suddenly realized.
Okay.
It just, anybody who's ever seen the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey remembers the scene where the dawn is raising, the sun's rising over the horizon, and the dramatic music. It was more like that in incredibly slow motion. It just didn't, it was very, very slow in coming.
John, I appreciate you sharing that as well, because sometimes when there's family members or loved ones watching someone in this path of addiction, they might think like, how do you not get this? This is destroying your life, or this is, really impacting your ability to move forward. And I think what I'm hearing you say is you don't even recognize it.
No.
You know what I mean?
You don't see it.
It's
You don't see it. And I had two brothers who were at various stages of the same issue.
Okay.
And I'm sure my sisters could have pointed it out, but we weren't basically hanging around with them. So, it would have been, I don't know if I would have listened, but it would have been helpful, I think, if somebody could have explained to me and in a way that actually would sink in what that was doing to our parents.
Okay.
Because we were all adults and, off doing our thing, but they could see it. A couple of us had gotten arrested for a couple of things, and, they could see what could see that they were trying to tell us. They were trying to tell us we were playing with matches and we weren't listening.
So out of the 8 siblings, 3 of you ended up struggling with addiction?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that really just kind of shows in a family without substances, growing up in an intact family.
Oh, yeah.
3 ended up with addiction issues, which really kind of shows that genetic marker.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Certainly, there's an environmental aspect of that as well. We all grew up under the same conditions, and we all reacted to those conditions the same way. So I'm certainly not unique in any respect, but there's a lot of ways we can get to the point that we're at.
Sure.
And sometime this is something that slowly, as part of that whole dawning experience, at some point I finally realized that I was responsible for everything I was doing. I could blame it on my parents, my family, my friends, or, other people, all I want. But that was all past history, and I was responsible for what I was doing. And I
so where
had to
did
change my attitude.
That even thought come from? Were you just starting to get miserable, or isolated, lonely?
Yeah, okay. I was. I was still going to work every day. That wasn't the issue. And I was, reasonably well respected by my coworkers and all of that. But, but being by myself all that time and having a terrible time with relationships and, and my escape was to go drinking. So
how old were you at this point where you're kind of realizing, hey, this isn't working well for me?
35.
Okay.
Yeah, I had pretty good career by then in alcoholism, among other things. Yeah. That it had taken a hold.
Yeah.
And
so now you're having these thoughts of, okay, I'm not happy.
What do I do?
Yeah,
I'm miserable. What do I do? Yeah, what do I do? And I stumbled around for a while, and then finally somebody introduced me to a 12-step program, and that made sense.
Okay.
That stuck. I didn't get it right away. Again, that's another thing where I've often heard the phrase, I wasn't struck sober. It wasn't a bolt of lightning issue where, it was just one of those things where after hanging around sober people long enough,
kind of rubbed off.
it rubbed off. Yeah, exactly. I can't take any credit for any of it other than the fact that I kept showing up.
That's awesome.
That's all. And then I didn't do that on a regular basis either. It just, after a while, it just started to sink in.
So who was that person that introduced you? Was it someone in recovery or someone
Yes.
that's, okay.
Someone close to me, and I will not go there.
Okay. That's all right. The only reason I was reaching out is because, sometimes it takes that loving person to say, hey, John,
And it was done in such a way for me that it was almost like I was tricked into it. I wasn't, but I was invited to a meeting for somebody's celebration of sobriety for a certain period. And I said, okay, I'll go. And then I got to that meeting. I sat in that meeting and said, oh, these people are like me.
They're like me.
And it was strange because the next meeting I went to, I was a nervous wreck. But that was the first meeting I went to for myself, not for anybody else, for me. And I will say that I am one of the fortunate ones that once I came to a meeting for myself, I have not had the need to pick up another drink.
That's awesome.
And intervening years before that, I had attempted to stop drinking a couple of times and succeeded for extended periods of time and slowing down when I was going to school and all of that.
Okay.
But I was using that as an excuse to say I didn't have a problem. See, I can stop. Mm-hmm. I can stop anytime I want. Except that I didn't stay stopped.
Right. For a week or two.
Yeah, for a week or two. Actually, for a year one time.
Wow.
But there were legal consequences which brought me to that point. You don't get in the car after a good night of drinking scotch and go into a blackout and drive past the police station and run a red light with a police cruiser sitting there at the traffic light.
Wow.
You just don't get away with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I had some consequences from that. But I did thank the police officers because once I realized what had happened, if they had not pulled me over, somebody would likely be dead.
You or somebody else.
Me or somebody else. It would have been horrible. And I do know people this happened to wake up from the blackout finding out that I had killed somebody.
Yeah, wow.
I knew at least one person where exactly that happened. No recollection of it. None. To this day, couldn't tell you what happened.
Wow. Well, blessing that they caught you.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
I'm incredibly grateful to those guys for doing what they did. Oh, they were good to me. I mean, I don't think I was belligerent, but they treated me okay, for given the circumstances. But
so consequences can be helpful.
Yep.
They can at least
get my attention.
Get your attention. Okay. Yep. But they're not always that life-changing situation.
I had another 10 years of drinking ahead of me.
Very good.
So, I stopped for a while, but without a program, I went back to it.
So what difference did that program make in your life?
It gave me a sense of fellowship. I was not by myself. I was able to follow what someone else had done to stay sober.
Okay.
I don't have to drink again. All I have to do is what these people were doing. And
That's important to share, because I imagine when you're struggling and things are getting dark and hard, you probably don't feel like anyone else can get this or understand it, or you see other people drinking and they're not in the situation you are.
Yeah, it was one of those things where I did not understand that other people could drink, put a beer down, half full, and walk away.
And that was not ever going to be your case.
I don't ever recall doing that. Well, actually, I did it one time, and that was the day I quit drinking. I literally put the beer down, half full, and said, "What the hell am I doing?" and walked out of the bar. That's when I stopped.
And that was right after you had started the program?
That was before, but I had met somebody who was in the program, and that seed got planted.
Okay.
And then, but I was miserable. I was doing what we call white knuckling. I was doing it by myself. I can do this for a year. But it was my introduction to the 12-step program that gave me a sense of belonging and sense of direction.
Nice.
So, made some incredible friendships in that fellowship.
Neat.
Lifelong.
Are you still attend meetings?
As much as I can.
Nice.
As much as I can, yes. Some of the people that were in the room when I first walked in, I am still in touch with. I mean, they're 500 miles away, but I'm in touch with them.
If you ever need someone, they're there.
Call them up, talk to them. Yeah. When we go back to visit, because, we still have family up there, we go look them up. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Something neat about shared experiences and just.
Oh, yeah.
I always marvel at how supportive the recovery community is of each other. Like, I don't know if you see that anywhere else, but I mean, y'all really just have each other's back. And I think in life, whether it's addiction or any other issue, I mean, we just need accountability. We need fellowship. We need encouragement. Those are just, I think, what we need is human beings, and I think that creates a environment of.
And that fellowship extends beyond just staying sober. Person that I know this morning, we were doing a Zoom meeting, and he got on the call, and his apartment had been broken into, and all of his stuff had been stolen the night before, and we were helping him get back on his feet. He didn't have major losses, but he's in his late 70s. He doesn't have a lot of money. He's been in the program for many years, and a lot of people know him and rely on him. So we're all taking up a collection and going to go out and front him some money to replace the things that are lost, so that he can pick up where he was.
What you were
but
saying,
that's the kind of thing that's before that I never would have had anything like that. I was not part of a community that would do that.
And I think one of the neat things is, that initial part of getting in a community is to help prevent or stop, but you move on from there, that's why you come together. But I think it's so important to find, okay, how do you do life without substances? How do you have healthy relationships? How do you support each other? You know what I mean? And I think there's probably a lot you have to learn.
Oh, yeah.
After years of not having healthy relationships. Or
one of the hallmarks of addiction is you don't know how messed up your thinking is. You don't understand it. You don't realize that it's so far away from what anybody else does. We use the same words to speak, but the meaning behind them is so different. Somebody who doesn't have an addiction issue, it might as well be speaking a totally different language. We just there's no way, no path there to connect.
One of the things that John is explaining is that the brain literally is wired differently. That substances, the brain depends on that substance to release the dopamine to make it feel okay. So what might feed a healthy brain, things that might give it pleasure could be, hugging on a puppy or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Where when that brain is so conditioned to need that alcohol or that substance, nothing else is lighting it up except that substance of addiction. And that's truly like a brain development thing that happens.
It very much is. Very much is. Once, and this goes to once somebody stops drinking or stops using drugs, within a few days or a couple of weeks, the physical effects you start to recover from the physical effects. But what is so difficult for us to understand is that, as you were saying, the brain is wired to go in one direction and you're trying to go in another. And it's going to take a long time to make the adjustments.
Sure.
It really is going to take a long time, which is why it's such a struggle for people new in recovery to make that change, because they don't know any other way.
Yeah. Your thinking's...
It's so messed up. You're so lost. You're so lost. And you don't know it. That's it gets back again, for me, it gets back to denial. Nothing wrong with me. What do you mean? What are you talking about? You don't understand it. You just don't understand it.
Yeah. And I think that happens any time in life. Your norm is what you experience. So sometimes you just don't know any other way.
That's right.
So, it probably just takes a lot of time. First, you have to get sober. And then you have to realize, this isn't working for me.
Right.
What do I need to change, or what do I need to add in? Because your life probably really revolved around that substance. So now, okay, what do I need to fill my life with?
Yeah.
So I'm not allowing opportunities.
Right. Sometimes recovery is replacement. If you want to get rid of one bad habit, you have to replace it with another. Early on in sobriety, for me, it was, believe it or not, switching addictions.
Okay.
I had a Coca-Cola in my hand all the time. So I was using sugar to help. I didn't know that.
Sure.
I had to have something in my hand. I had to have something to drink, and I was using sugar drinks to substitute for alcohol. But I didn't know that I was switching addictions.
Yeah.
Which led on to another struggle, which, but it's, at least that one is not, it's not as deadly, and it's not, doesn't have all the other consequences. Sure. Yet there are health issues associated with it, but it, at least that one I had a fighting chance.
Yeah.
So, but,
So, started your program, have been in for how many years?
26.
26, still working, attending?
Yep.
I'm sure you're sponsoring others at this point, or?
I'm attempting to.
Wonderful.
You can only sponsor somebody who wants it. So that's why I said it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are lessons you learned from these years of recovery? Anything that you wish someone would have told you? earlier on?
I wish someone had told me how much damage addiction could do. When I was going to high school, when I was going to college, all the cool kids were drinking. And at that time, some of them were doing drugs too.
Okay.
Some of them didn't survive that. I had one classmate who graduated in June and committed suicide in July. So others I'm in contact with now, they're doing okay now.
Okay.
You know, I don't know if they're in any kind of 12-step program or not. I don't think so, because they are, you know, partaking, as we say. But it doesn't seem to be controlling their lives. So they may be among those who truly are not alcoholic. They can take it or leave it.
Yeah.
You know.
So I'm just going to throw out, just because I keep hearing this, it is so important that we talk to our young people about addiction, the consequences of substance use, because even if you think your kid's going to roll their eyes and not listen to you, they really do value your voice. Research shows 50% of parents who speak to their young people, there's a 50% chance of the young people not using. So they really do care what we say. I think we've done a much better job in schools. Most all of our schools have prevention education programs, but it's important for adults. These conversations, they're not natural. I mean, you don't just, if you don't do a little bit of work, you're probably going to struggle with some of these conversations with your young people. So I'm going to just say, go to the Tuscarawas County Anti-Drug Coalition website. We have a lot of information on how parents can talk to their young people about addiction and alcohol use and prescription drug and marijuana and vaping and tobacco issues with talking points. Like, say this, you know, think about this, because you really do need to equip yourself to have those conversations. And I'm also going to say, for persons in the recovery community, we would love to have you at the table at the Anti-Drug Coalition, because we have normally we have a lot of events and opportunities to educate the community. And I think, you know, having that voice, whether we're at a booth at the county fair or wherever we're at, to have those opportunities to say to people from the community, hey, you know, have a conversation, or this is what I would have liked to have heard. So we're accepting all volunteers.
Yes.
And we just really want to encourage people to have conversations with our young people. It's not guaranteed it'll make a difference, but there's a good chance that they might hear something and just really understand it. Like John was saying, if he would have known his grandfather had an addiction, it might have made a difference.
Might have made a difference, because then I could have seen the damage that it did and understood what kind of damage it would do.
So would you so almost recommend to people, if you have an addiction or it's running in your family, take that opportunity to talk to your young people?
Oh, yes. We did that with our daughter.
Okay.
And she, so far, doesn't have any such issues. And we're grateful for that.
Yeah.
Who knows where it's going to go from here? Nothing is ever guaranteed.
Yeah.
Tomorrow is a different day.
Yeah.
Different set of circumstances. We're, you know, just grateful for where we are today.
Yeah. And addiction doesn't run in my family, but I know we've had a lot of conversations with my kids, you know. Even though addiction doesn't run, the science is there to say don't drink before 21 if you don't have a family history, because you just increase your chance of addiction, you know. So we have that conversation often. If we can delay the onset, then you can make an adult decision. But you need to understand your chance of your brain being wired for addiction happened with that young initiation as well.
When I turned 18, the laws in upstate New York, the legal limit was 18. And they have since changed it to 21.
Yeah.
Of course, at the time I was grumbling, no, they should have left that alone, a lot of, you know, but
But now,
Yeah, it was the right thing to do. Definitely the right thing to do. Yeah, because you don't realize how much you're still learning in those 3 years and how much your brain is still developing.
it is developing.
Yes, it is. It's incredible. Yeah, I wish I hadn't done the things that I did when I was 18. But
I'm sure most of us can say we've made some dumb decisions back then.
Yes. But on the other hand, I do have to say that with all of the stuff that I've gone through and put myself through and everyone else around me, it's brought me to where I am today. And in my case, it's put me in a position where I can help somebody else. And that, for the fellowship, I went there at first to get help for myself. Mm-hmm. After a while, I realized that I could help myself by helping someone else.
So service has been key.
It is so important. And it's so important to continue sobriety, because if I can stop thinking about my problems by helping somebody else, all of a sudden my problems aren't problems anymore. We say if we can get out of our own heads.
Yeah.
Of saying that I learned and can very much appreciate the inside of my head is a bad neighborhood. You really don't want to be there very long. Not by myself anyway. So, it just it emphasizes the importance of being with other people in recovery and talking about what's going on. And if you got some, I like to say, if the squirrels are running loose inside my head, I probably ought to tell somebody.
Yeah. And, I do think for everybody, when we're not focused on ourselves, when we're investing in another, that's where joy comes in.
Sure.
That's where purpose and value and true relationship comes in. I know I always find more life satisfaction when I'm serving others,
Especially family.
Yeah.
For me, anyway.
Yeah. Very neat.
As much as I can.
So I'll tell you what, this has been phenomenal. I've really enjoyed our conversation. Is there anything else you'd want to share?
We don't have that much time.
I know we could go on forever.
Could go on for
we really
hours.
could,
Yes,
because
we could.
Your perspective is just really neat, and you've had a long time in addiction, and you've had a long time in recovery, which gives you a lot of just opportunity to just share all over the place. So if you can think of one key takeaway of what you wish someone would have told you. That's hard because you could go a million different ways.
You could go for hours on that. But if there was one key thing anybody could have told me, was how insidious alcohol and drug addiction could be as far as destroying everything.
Okay.
Everything. It's we talk about destroying lives. It destroys everything. It destroys everything. It destroys families. It destroys it destroys everything.
I appreciate that. That's a great takeaway because we live in a society that's fast-paced. Things are coming at us. We probably aren't all that equipped to deal with things that are coming at us. Mm-hmm. And sometimes people use substances just as that way to self-medicate or cope or to get through those situations. And we need to be mindful that it's a really dangerous way to deal with situations. And, sometimes you might think, oh, what's the big deal? But it can be ever life-changing. So I think it's a great takeaway. It's not something to be taken lightly.
No, it can be. For some people, it's not a big deal. But for those of us that have addictive tendencies, it's...
And you hit on it. It's not even just that genetic piece.
No.
It's that life situation. And I heard it early on. You were like, how you viewed yourself.
Yeah.
And I think we all I mean, we all come from different life situations, but, you know, whatever those life experiences have been, whether it's been trauma or if it's been a low perception of self or whatever it is, it can certainly play into what that drink or what that substance does and how it might meet a need for that brain. So I think it's a really good takeaway. So I appreciate that.
For those people who, I don't know if this last thing I'm going to say will help anybody or not, but all of the things that I've done to get where I am now, I wish there was a way that I could have transferred some of that to my nephew.
Okay.
He's gone.
I'm so sorry.
And there was nothing we could do. So, even when you know, it can still.
Oh, sure. It's a life.
Yeah.
Someone clearly you loved, and
of all the members of my family, he was the one that was most like me. That's the way I looked at it. And he made all the mistakes that I did. The only difference is he was into opiates. That's the only difference.
And you know what? We have ever-changing drugs that come down the pike, and they get more powerful and more potent and more deadly, which is absolutely true. Yeah. But I will say I am sure your nephew is just really proud of you investing in other people. Because I'm just sorry. I don't even have a word for you other than I appreciate your heart and your willingness to share and willingness to invest in other people. And for that, I really appreciate that. So, guys, I appreciate you listening today. John, I thank you for sharing your story and some of your experiences and insight. And guys, catch us next week for another episode of the Tuscarawas County Anti-Drug Coalition.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Tuscarawas County Anti-Drug Coalition podcast. Please follow us on Facebook and visit our website at adctusk.org.